Each year, thousands of young people suffer from abuse, mental, physical, sexual. The reasons are very complex. How do we begin to plant new seeds of hope for both the abused and the abuser? That's what this program deals with, and you'll meet an actress who has dedicated her name and her energies to helping people understand the roots of child abuse, including drug addiction and chemical dependency. Film star Cheryl Ladd is helping the abused in our society discover the cause of their pain and what can be done to prevent it. Hopefully through her efforts and the efforts of others, we can all learn that it's great to be alive.
River Park Foundation presents It's Great to Be Alive with host Glenn Jorgensen and featuring actress Cheryl Ladd in The Dream Destroyers.
Cheryl Jean Stoppelmoor grew up in Huron, South Dakota, a long way from the bright lights of Hollywood. But the values that Cheryl brings with her today are rooted in her experience as a child. Unlike many abused and abusive families, Cheryl's roots grew strong and straight. She was able to withstand the lure of alcohol when she was growing up because of the way she grew up.
I think what basically helped me actually deal with all those high school years and certainly that element of growing up and peer pressure was that my parents gave me a really good sense of my responsibility to myself and who I am and my individuality and sort of the innate preciousness of that. And so I really thank them for that kind of guidance they gave me, and all through my life gave me a lot of responsibility as they felt I was ready to cope with it. And because of that, because of being someone that really had to make their own decisions and was given responsibility to decide for themselves all along the way in my life, it gave me an opportunity to trust myself and to know myself fairly well. So I had a future plan for myself very early on in my life, and I did not want to be deterred from that or stifle those dreams. And I think that the big negative about alcoholism and drugs is that they're great destroyers of dreams and great destroyers of your life, and it takes so much away from you that I guess I was fortunate enough to have the wherewithal to know that I didn't want to give my life up to something like that. So.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Basically, a good self-image or a degree of knowing yourself and what you wanted to do and what it would take to do that.
I think as parents, I think we all have to be very positive reinforcements for our children. I think if we listen to ourselves on any given day, we say no a lot more than we say yes, or a lot more than we say positive things. And as a parent, I'm as guilty as the next person. I think we have to be conscious of when we guide our children to try to do it in the most positive sense, to make them feel good about who they are and give them hopefully a good foundation of being able to deal with the peer pressures out there and to really have a sense of their goals and their dreams for themselves and the realities of what it is. I think so many parents tend to want to put their head in the sand and say, oh, my child would never. Well, many children do, and all of us have, I think, at some point in our life, experimented, certainly with drugs or alcohol. But a lot of us could get through it. A lot of us made it through. A lot of us didn't. I certainly have had friends who didn't. So. Did
that same basic standards and understanding of life then must have stood you in good stead out in this world too?
It did, certainly, and there were certain difficulties and problems that I had to face when I came here. Loneliness, for one. I was by myself without family and not having a lot of friends and having to establish a whole new life in a whole new city by myself at a very young age. It was difficult. And yet, because of that bond with my family and that bond that I had with myself and my higher power, it really did help me through a lot of very difficult times. And I think I have a very non-compromising nature when it comes to this very optimistic reality that I believe in. And I mean that in the best sense. I'm a realist, but I'm a very optimistic one. So I deal with things that are thrown at me and come at me in a very real sense, and I try to use them as learning experiences and to know that everybody doesn't have it great all the time, and you move through these things. I think, again, about drugs and alcohol, if I can use this metaphor, it's like treading water when you're using these things. You're not moving forward. You're not moving anywhere. You're trying to keep your head afloat, and it keeps trying to pull you under. And when you're not, I have a lot of friends who have made it through programs and have come out the other side with their lives back. And the joy that they feel, and in a way the great understanding they have of now of what drew them to it, and sort of the pride that they feel in themselves that they have their lives back, and the joy they feel with it is so rewarding to see. And to see them dealing not only with the happy moments in their life and really being in there to enjoy them, is to see how they get through crisis now, and that know that they can, and to be strong the next time something comes along.
I sense a real spirituality in your philosophy of life.
I've always felt I've had a guardian angel. I've always sort of been connected. And in the darkest of times, that was where I went to feel healed, to feel some peace, to feel a bit guided, to feel at least that there was an arm around my shoulder, and that if I can just wait until the sun comes up the next day, I'll be fine. We all have moments of desperation. It hasn't all been wonderful for me all the time. And I think we're all so self-critical anyway. I think we are just creatures of that sort of thing. That, I think one of the wonderful things that my parents gave me was a sense of that I'm the only Cheryl Jean Stoppelmoor on earth. And that makes me very special innately, you know. There isn't another one. So if you kind of start with that premise and you kind of get up in the morning and you say, I love you, you're all right, it's going to be a terrific day, and to know that you can't change everything and make everything right, that everything isn't under your power, it makes it a lot easier. I think oftentimes when I get in a rut, it's because I'm trying to control everything and trying to make everything go the way I think it should go. And the minute I sort of say, oh well, that didn't work out so well, and move on and move through it and look at it and don't beat myself to death about perhaps things I should have done better or handled better, and learn from it, you always tend to have a much better day, I think.
Cheryl's belief in the positive role of parenting and the effect on children when that positive role is missing led to her involvement in child abuse research and prevention.
Again, going back to my parenting, knowing the value and sensing the value all my life of what that kind of guidance in my life meant to me, and that kind of support and that kind of encouragement. I was never pushed and was always supported, if you know what I mean. And let be. And I think the major thing that my parents did for me was talk to me, communicate with me, and listen to me. They were good listeners, and therefore, because they were not judgmental and were caring and sharing, that it gave me an opportunity to really kind of get to know myself and try not necessarily be them, but learn from them. And I think parenting is one of the great underestimated jobs of the world.
Miraculous.
I think right up next to being president, being a parent is equally as important a task, and not easy, and we're expected to be experts at something we have no experience at oftentimes. I think that child abuse was so important to me to get involved in because of the gifts that I was given by having great parents. And I think being a parent, now that I am, is a very difficult task, very rewarding, but very worrying. And I think oftentimes, especially in this day and age with women and men both in the workforce, and and children having less and less time with their parents, the time that you share with them has to be really quality time, a really good time, and sharing and talking and listening time. And it's important to be a good parent. Or try to be the best parent you can be.
And you'd like, obviously would like that to be the message that, and for children, the awareness that this happens in homes. And of course, being in the field of chemical dependency, we see so often the relationship or a high incidence of abuse, whether it be physical abuse or psychological abuse.
Yes.
Living in the home of where alcoholism is can be very abusive for the children growing up, and can have an ongoing effect.
Well, it's
on
very,
them.
very much a vicious circle, because children who are abused by either chemically dependent parents or not
Right.
will either become chemically dependent and abusive to their children, or just abusive to their own children. It's such a vicious circle that takes place, because you only know how to parent by the way you were parented. That is your only your prime
Right.
example of how to be a parent. So if your parents abused you, whether you really have a desire to initially or not, you tend to be somewhat abusive to your children, if not equally as abusive as your parents.
What do you, Cheryl, what would you recommend to some young people that will be watching this if they're in a troubled home?
Well, I think the first thing a young person has to do is forget that any embarrassment or any blame on themselves, because that isn't the case. But that help is available. Many, many people care. Many people have been through it themselves. Many more people than they would ever imagine. Many of their peers are suffering also, and it seems to be oftentimes a huge secret that none of the kids ever deal with, because kids always want to be bigger, better, faster, and very much in competition with each other, and have no sort of fault or blemish, and they want to be that. And so many kids in the same classroom will be going through so many of the same difficulties, and yet they will never know it between them. And I would just say to them to reach out, to find out, to go and get some help, to get somebody, talk to somebody, an aunt, an uncle, a friend, a minister, a hotline. Call, find out what's available, and there will be a lot of people there to help, and to come and talk to you, and to perhaps talk to your parents and get your parents help. It's out there. There are a lot of caring people out there.
Like so many problems, if you don't confront it, it will not go away, it will not get better, it has to be dealt with.
It only gets worse.
Right.
That's right.
Cheryl, one of the meaningful things that has happened, I think, to bring this whole subject of child abuse to the forefront was the program that you did dealing with child abuse. Could you tell us a little about how that happened and what impact that had on your commitment to getting involved in this?
Well, this is quite a while ago now. Again, because of my wonderful upbringing and wonderful parenting, I had been watching on the news and seeing in newspapers reports about abused children. And I guess perhaps because I had not had any sort of experience with it or understanding of it, I was terrified and wanted to learn more about it, and did a lot of research. And when ABC asked if I would like to do some films for them, I said yes, that I would. And so I developed a project through a lot of research that I had done, and working with a writer, about a woman that was a child abuser. And when the script was taken to them, they were a bit shocked, and they had no idea this was a kind of film that I wanted to do. But I wanted to, first of all, educate people to the overwhelming problem that I had discovered, not only myself, but certainly many other people, that was just coming out, the overwhelming problem of child abuse, and to not only just educate them, to be the person that was the abuser, to help people understand how and why it occurs, and what kind of pressures people are under, and again, the vicious cycle of child abuse, parents abusing children, and those children then abusing their own children. So through all this research and everything, then I was contacted by two wonderful women, Sarah O'Meara and Yvonne Feddersen, who have Child Help USA. and asked if I would like to come and see their facility in Beaumont, California, the village there, a residential facility for abused children. And this was, 10 years ago now, or more, that I've been involved with them and working with abused children and their program, Child Help USA, which I think is doing enormous things for all of us. It's an interesting statistic about relating to drugs and alcohol and abuse. They're also interrelated. Some 80% of the people that are in our prisons were abused children. And if we can just get a hold of these young people and help people be better parents, and more capable parents, more confident parents, we'll prevent a lot of crime, a lot of drugs, all of those things that are so interconnected, crime and drugs and abuse and all of those things. You know.
I really believe, Cheryl, that the answer has to be in the area of education, in attitude adjustment, if you will. There simply somehow has to be a change in our philosophy of living to some degree, that instead of the negative, the uplifting, and that it is great to be alive.
I think that there's a big change occurring and has been, and I hope that we continue it with the education about drugs in this country specifically, and alcohol. The more educated we are, certainly when in the early 70s when I was growing up, drugs were a very sort of kind of hip and very glamorous and very non-addicting sort of, well, everybody's doing it, it's no big deal. And that was the attitude. We were not educated. We did not understand. And I think the thrust of educating, starting in the second and third grade with kids about what drugs are and what they do, is very, very important. I think the drug problem in our country is so connected with the violence and the gangs and what's going on in our country as far as guns and shooting and making our streets so unsafe and our schools unsafe and our churches unsafe, that I think we need to really look at how serious the problem is, and that we can each do something about it by making sure our children know.
They have the facts.
And have the facts.
Another dramatic role brought awareness of a special problem facing many in the medical community, the drug and alcohol abuse among professionals. Cheryl's starring role in the made-for-television movie Deadly Care brought her closer to a problem that has been kept a secret for a long time. The true story of an addicted nurse took on special significance for Cheryl as she delved into both the character and the problem.
While you're at it, we got some stuff in here. So wasteful.
They'll know what to do with it downstairs.
Yeah. Good.
Today is your birthday, David?
Yes, it is.
Then wait, no, don't save your applause, folks. Today is your birthday. Tomorrow, Florence, is your birthday.
Yes,
And Cindy, what are you doing tomorrow?
I'm gonna get married tomorrow.
Hey,
Doesn't mean anything for me.
What got you into that one?
Again, concern for that particular problem. And because I think it was so fascinating, this particular woman's life, which is a true story, a woman who was very bright, very capable, very strong, and yet came from an alcoholic family and didn't understand the influence that had over her life, that instead of dealing with the pressures in her life in a very constructive and sharing way, and sometimes it's so hard to open that basement door and go down and look at that boogeyman. It's very difficult. But it's like that wonderful children's story, that the minute you do and you go down there and you turn the light on, it's about this big and you can get over it, you know. I just was fascinated by her because of her intelligence, because You don't think of people that have careers and are making money and are intelligent and know better, that they fall into it, and certainly they do. Very much they do. And I felt for her because she was very closed off emotionally, very unable to open up and share her life and her worries and her fears with anyone. So therefore she tried to get rid of them by being overly medicated. And it just so happened that she was a nurse, certainly not picking on the nursing profession. It was the fact that she was a professional in a professional environment, who seemed to sort of have her life all together. And there are many people like that.
Well, of course, we dealt with so many from every walk of life and every level of life that I think that is one of the things that the public is beginning to understand, that it can happen, to anyone. In your research for that program, and I guess I related to it because I was dually addicted and much into the prescription end of things. Misuse of it. Certainly the doctors weren't trying to addict me, but it often
prescribing
happened.
For yourself.
Right. Did you see that phase of addiction as being a large problem, the addiction to some of the tranquilizers and sleeping pills?
Oh, very much so. I think you have to be very careful, and we can't, again, educate people enough. Throw out old prescriptions. Get rid of them. Don't prescribe for yourself. Do exactly as you're told with these particular things that you're given from your physician. And I think physicians have to be very careful. It's a huge responsibility to write your name on a piece of paper that will give someone a substance that you better make sure they understand what they're taking, why they're taking it, and if this doctor finds that this person is abusing that particular drug, they have to help that person and talk to them. I think they need to take more responsibility. I think doctors should be very, very careful, and I think many, many of them are, and are very aware of not getting their patients hooked on these drugs. But I think some are a little cavalier about it.
Starting with a basic understanding that the addictive personality, if one does something to it, will do twice as much, and so there's a tendency to overcompensate. You, and I, just as briefly, you did some research, I noted, where you got drunk.
Yes.
To get the real feel of that. That must have been...
Well, I'll tell you what, so often as an actor, and I thought certainly in this role, so often as an actor you study other people's behavior to get a point across, or to bring certain elements of a character out. And I thought, I've seen a lot of people drunk, and unfortunately I've been there a few times myself, but I never observed myself drunk. And I thought, if I'm going to do this character, I better know how I am, how I behave, what happens to me. And I'll tell you what, what an education this was. It made me never want to be in that condition. It made me see what alcohol does to me. I think it's a great educational tool for people to see what happens to them. Very helpful. I was very, very hungover and not well for several days afterwards, but I'm happy that I did it. It gave me an opportunity to see exactly what alcohol does to your personality. And it was not a pretty sight. I looked at it like this and studied it very diligently, and hopefully used a lot of that to portray this woman. One of the scenes that really shows you what is going on in her life and why, as a nurse with all this availability of drugs in the hospital, she seems to not be able to cope. She's under enormous pressure in her job, very high level nursing, and goes home to visit her family, and where you see her visit with her very alcoholic sister who is trying to kill herself with alcohol.
How do you get this stuff here? In the bedroom? I steal. I'm a drunk. I'm devious. You're into angina and occlusions and thrombosis, and arteries and veins and things. You wouldn't understand about deviousness. You're into healing and living and all of that crap. You wouldn't understand about pain and addiction, getting dead, getting out.
And you listen to that communication or lack of it, and the reaching out and the inability of either of them to touch each other in the real sense, to get a hold of each other, because what she doesn't understand is that she is in the same boat. She is equally as bad off as her sister. And the communication in the family and how bad it is, and how disappointed they all sort of are with each other, and yet can't talk about it and can't support each other. So when she goes back to the hospital and finds herself under more and more pressure, she reaches for these pills and alcohol. And she gets to the place where she's taking hundreds of milligrams, the amount of drugs that would kill a normal person, kill a horse, because she has done it gradually over a long period of time. She takes in unbelievable amounts and is functioning, or thinks she's functioning, until she nearly kills a patient.
Right, of course, he had a shot this morning at 6. So the short-acting insulin from the shot he just had is hitting at the same time the long-term stuff from this morning is also hitting. When you screw up, Miss Hotshot, you really do it. He's going into hypoglycemic shock, then coma. Mr. Skinner's getting dead. You ever do that before? Kill a patient?
I just found it so fascinating, A, that it was a true story, B, that it was a woman some we would all look up to, admire, bright, intelligent, interesting, capable, who had these problems. And I think that was very educational for all of us.
And she did eventually recover.
And she recovered and is now out helping other people recover.
And recovery is what it's all about. River Park Foundation wants you to know that if you're in an abusive situation, whether a victim of physical, mental, alcohol, drug abuse, there is help available. The destructive cycle of abuse can be broken, but only you can break it. Only you can pick up the phone and make the call to a community helping agency, a local hospital, a recovering friend. You can realize that help is out there, hope is out there. Reach for it. Then you too can discover that it's great to be alive.